I just finished watching Paranorman for the first time since I was younger, and there's one thing I haven't seen too many others talk about. Something that completely changes how the witch's curse works, and how Norman even got his gift. But before we start waking up the dead and talking to ghosts, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and I promise it won't curse you like it did these zombies. In Paranorman, we meet Norman, a young boy who's outcasted by the town and looked at as strange, even by his own family. Because Norman isn't normal. He has the gift to talk to ghosts and the undead. But Norman isn't the only one in his family with this special gift. Norman has a great uncle who lives at the top of the hill by the old graveyard, Mr. Prenderghast. And Mr. Prenderghast has the same gift that Norman does. And we learn he has been watching Norman from afar, spying on him like some creep for years. And there's a reason for that. You see, every year to keep the witch asleep, someone with the special gift of talking to the undead has to read from a special book. But with Mr. Prendergast getting old and with Norman now growing up, he has to shift that responsibility of reading from the book to Norman. You see, as Norman gets older, he starts to have these visions of the witch's curse, the past haunting him. And the only one who understands this is Mr. Prendergast. And he pops out of a toilet as a ghost after he unfortunately passes away, and tells Norman exactly what he has to do to prevent the witch's curse. And with my theory of the fact that the previous member has to pass away, it would explain how the gift passes on through generations and how it has to skip. Because why would Norman's family not possess the gift? His sister doesn't, his mom doesn't, and his dad most definitely doesn't have it. But why does Norman? And where did this gift even come from? About 3/4 into the film, we find out what the witch's name was. It's Agatha Prendergast. And if that last name sounds familiar, you'd be right, because that's the same last name as Norman's uncle, meaning that Agatha isn't just some random witch, she's actually Norman's relative from about 300 years ago. And the whole reason Agatha is called a witch in the first place was because she has the same gift as Norman. And unfortunately for Agatha, instead of just being bullied and outcasted by the town, she was put on trial and ultimately killed, being called the witch. A tragic death for an 11-year-old girl who didn't ask for any of this. But if Agatha had the same gift as Norman, how did Mr. Prendergast get it? And who had it before Agatha? When taking a look at the book entrusted to Norman to keep Agatha asleep, he gets confused while trying to read it. Because it isn't just some special book with another curse or even a spell, it's a children's fairy tale, a bedtime story. And going all the way to the end of the film, after Norman talks to Agatha and stops her reign over the town, she explains how she recognizes the tree and how her mother used to read her stories there. And that right there is a very important detail, but it leaves a lot of loose ends. Because if Agatha had the gift and was killed, how did the gift pass on through later generations? And who held the same gift before Agatha? And also the fact on how they knew to read Agatha's stories for the last 300 years. When looking at the gift itself, I made the bold claim about how the previous family member had to die before the next one takes the responsibility of the gift completely over, and how it would make sense as to why the gift seems to skip generations, but I could also be wrong. Because in Agatha's case, if she died before the next person with the gift was born, how did the gift survive? Well, there are a few possibilities. The first possibility is that Agatha is a direct parallel to Norman, meaning she could have a great aunt or great uncle who shared the gift and fully understood her, who kept her calm, who later could have had children who would go on and possess the gift for the next 300 years, eventually leading to Norman and Norman's great uncle. The second possibility is that Agatha's mother goes on to have another child after suffering from the grief of her daughter. The only problem with that theory is that the child wouldn't be old enough to keep Agatha asleep, as they would be too young to talk and even understand her. So it'd have to be someone either the same age or older, and Agatha never mentions having a sibling, so this is less likely. The third possibility is if my theory is right about the skipping generations, then maybe her mother's siblings had children, and her mother asked them to read her stories as they passed it on until it reached Norman. The fourth and final one I'll mention, because to be honest they are essentially endless, is that Agatha's mom simply read to her through her grief at Agatha's grave, keeping her asleep by accident, and it would later become a family tradition. Because even though Agatha would be a ghost, it doesn't mean she wouldn't be able to hear her mom or a relative. And I know Agatha stated she hasn't seen her mom since her death, but if she was asleep, this would still make sense. So when or if Agatha's mom had more kids, or even Agatha's family fully took over the tradition, the gift coulda came back and kept Agatha asleep up until Norman broke the cycle. And one thing that makes the most sense to me would be a mix of possibility 1 and possibility 4. As looking at Norman and Agatha side by side, they are made out to be direct parallels of one another with key differences. Both Norman and Agatha are 11 years old, and their gift is a burden to them. They are treated like outcasts, bullied, and in Agatha's case, she was ultimately killed. And with the possibility of both Norman and Agatha having an older family member with the same gift, who understands how it is, and how both Norman and Agatha are shown to be treated differently, with the key difference of Agatha seeking revenge to those who hurt her, while Norman always forgave them. And the end of the movie portrays that beautifully. But there is still one problem with this. There wasn't any responsibility to pass on to Agatha that we know of. So if the gift has to pass on generations to pass on the responsibility, what would Agatha's responsibility be, since we know Norman's is to keep Agatha asleep? Well, if we take possibility 4 seriously, then we can make sense of all this mess. Because if Agatha's mother read to her out of pure grief for her child without knowing of someone else possessing the same gift, it may have become the accidental tradition of the rest of the bloodline. And when Agatha's mother passes away, her dying wish would probably be to keep reading to her deceased child. So naturally it gets handed down to the next relative and the next for the next 300 years. And if we circle back to Agatha, she may have even been the first one in the family to talk to ghosts, as she was also the only one to be shown to have other abilities like lightning and even raising the dead. So what if when she cursed the townspeople to make them pay, that curse also caused her gift to be passed on until someone breaks the cycle? And that's why Norman has the gift, and even why his ancestors do, and why Norman breaks the curse. But if he broke the curse, why can Norman still see ghosts? Because even though the gift was tied to the curse itself, it doesn't just simply disappear. Because when Agatha had it, she had no responsibilities connected to it. So maybe it can still keep going through the next generations, or it could even stop with Norman himself. And when he eventually has kids and passes himself, the gift is gone forever. So what if Agatha was the beginning of the gift, her mom started a tradition, and Agatha's curse caused the birth of the gift through her bloodline, and Norman finally ended that 300-year curse? But I want to know, what do you think kept this gift alive for the last 300 years?